All right, it's been a pretty crazy day on Capitol Hill, and we are going to see really some wild times in the month or so ahead. But before we get into it, please like the video. And if you dislike the video in the end, you can just unclick it later. But don't forget to like the video first. We are going to be talking a little bit about Barr the Barbarian, as I'm calling him. And yes, I'm probably getting ahead of myself and I hope I'm not going to be disappointed. But I'll be honest with you, I like what I see. And when I heard him speaking to these people yesterday on Capitol Hill, specifically the people who were challenging him on Obamacare, and they were saying, "Well, you're going to put us out and screw us, and how can you not defend this piece of legislation?" Well, what Barr shot back with was, well, if you think that the legislation is so constitutional, you shouldn't be worried about losing in the Supreme Court. So I thought that was a fantastic performance yesterday, and especially given that he was, rebuffing repeatedly attempts to force him to release grand jury testimony and other elements of the Mueller report that I guess legally he can't. I personally, if it were my way, I would release the whole thing. I feel that that would be absolutely fine. But now he's got them really scared that what they'll find in the report will actually make the Democrats look worse. And here we go. Let's listen to what Barr the Barbarian has to say to Senator Jeanne Shaheen from New Hampshire.
I am going to be reviewing both the genesis and the conduct of intelligence activities directed at the Trump campaign during 2016. And a lot of this has already been investigated, and a substantial portion of it has been investigated and is being investigated by the Office of Inspector General at the department. But one of the things I want to do is pull together all the information from the various investigations that have gone on, including on the Hill and in the department, and see if there are any remaining questions to be addressed.
And can you share with us why you feel a need to do that?
Well, for the same reason.
So they're asking him, why do you feel you need to investigate why there was an investigation into Trump when that investigation came up with nothing? So that's a pretty stupid question on the part of Senator Shaheen. And I think she should have known what's going on and said, well, I'm going to ask as little about this as possible because nothing that comes out of this hearing is going to look good for the Democrats.
Reason we're worried about foreign influence in elections. We want to make sure that during an election, I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. It's a big deal. Generation I grew up in, which was the Vietnam War period, people were all concerned about spying on anti-war people and so forth by the government. And there were a lot of rules put in place to make sure that there's an adequate basis before our law enforcement agencies get involved in political surveillance. I'm not suggesting that those rules were violated, but I think it's important to look at that. And I'm not talking about the FBI necessarily, but intelligence agencies more broadly.
So you're not suggesting, though, that spying occurred?
I don't, I guess you could, I think spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur.
Well, let me...
But the question is whether it was adequately predicated. And I'm not suggesting it wasn't adequately predicated, but I need to explore that. I think it's my obligation. Congress is usually very concerned about intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies staying in their proper lane, and I want to make sure that happened. We have a lot of rules about that, and I want to say that I've said I'm reviewing this. I haven't set up a team yet, but I do have I have in mind.
This is what's really funny, that he said to them, well, if there was spying going on in the campaign, and he recognizes that it's spying, and if you're a sane person, you'd be crazy um, to try to say that it's not spying. When you have somebody who's under surveillance, that is called spying. When you have the NSA looking into the phone calls of people, using all of these intelligence operatives in order to entrap George Papadopoulos. Carter Page was also manipulated in order to extract information from him. That's spying. That's intelligence work. Now, if you wanted to make the point that it might have been justified because you think that Donald Trump may be colluding with Russia, or somebody other than Donald Trump is colluding with Russia, you could justify that. But the objection to calling it spying is pretty ridiculous.
Having some colleagues help me pull all this information together and let me know whether there's some areas that should be looked at. And I also want to make clear, this is not launching an investigation of the FBI. Frankly, to the extent there were any issues at the FBI, I do not view it as a problem that's endemic to the FBI. I think there was probably a failure among a group of leaders there at the upper echelon, and so I don't like to hear attacks about the FBI, because I think the FBI is an outstanding organization, and I think Chris Wray is a great partner for me. I'm very pleased that he's there as the director, and if it becomes necessary to look over some former officials' activities, I expect that I'll be relying heavily on Chris and work closely with him in looking at that information. But that's what I'm doing. I feel I have an obligation to make sure that government power is not abused. I mean, I think that's one of the principal roles of the Attorney General.
So look, I mean, you can distrust Barr, you can object to him having been a Bush administration appointee, the first Bush administration. I am not claiming that he's, the savior of everything, but this is good news. If he's doing an investigation and unrooting this, and he said all of the correct reasonings behind it. If there is spying and abuse of power in the government against private citizens, it has to be reviewed by the Justice Department. It has to be investigated. And this is great, and I hope to see more. And I think a lot of people are expecting more. We just don't know what it'll be. But yeah, I'm going to start calling him Barr the Barbarian. The more people he scares, that certainly warrants the nickname. Maybe there's nothing that comes of it. We don't know yet. So later, somebody got very bent out of shape because he'd used the word spying. So he had some very interesting responses to that as well.
Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Attorney General, for being here. I want to give you a chance to rephrase something you said, because I think when the Attorney General of the United States uses the word spying, it's rather provocative and, in my view, unnecessarily inflammatory. And I know what you're getting at, because you have explained yourself in terms of answering Senator Graham's questions and the questions of others. Do you want to rephrase what you're doing? Because I think the word spying could cause everybody in the cable news ecosystem to freak out. And I think it's necessary for you to be precise with your language here. You normally are, and I want to give you a chance to be especially precise here.
I'm not sure of all the connotations of that word that you're referring to, but unauthorized surveillance. I want to make sure there was no unauthorized surveillance.
Okay, thank you.
Is that more appropriate in your mind?
This is your call. I really did want to give you a chance to say it how you wanted to say it and make sure that you didn't misspeak, because you talk for a long.
So look at how he weasels out of it. He says to him essentially, well, don't you think it's kind of wrong for you to use the word spying? And Barr comes back and he says, unauthorized surveillance. Unauthorized. So they're trying to police language now. That's what the Democrats are more concerned with, policing language than enforcing laws and dealing with crimes. Okay, if there is abuse of power, if there's illegal surveillance, if there is, things like that. In immigration, they don't care about illegal immigration. They only care about, not offending the families of illegal aliens. Then the Democratic Party, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, but you have to wonder: do they believe in the laws that they're supposed to be enacting and executing? What's their position on that? Because they seem to be more interested in things like parsing words correctly in order to avoid the wrong type of publicity, which is exactly what he said here.
Long time you had yesterday, and I want to make sure that you use the
that.
words that you want to use.
Yeah.
Okay. On the Mueller summaries, on the Mueller team summaries within the report, I get that on every page there was a sort of admonition that this may contain 6E material. The question I have relates to your desire to make sure that the whole thing is intelligible. Are these reports going to be, are these summaries, when the report is released, going to be intelligible? I assume there may be some redactions, there may be none, but the basic question I think for the public is, are we going to get the gist of this, or is it going to be, on January of 2015, and then you have to flip 15 pages to find the next text?
You will get more than the gist.
Thank you.
So look at that face. He's like clearly people don't realize what they're asking for. What's known now is something that the media has been denying for 2 years, that there was this operation in place to entrap certain members of the Trump campaign with the goal of discrediting them by attaching them to Russian collusion. So Devin Nunes has, I'm not going to go through everything that I have on Nunes today because I don't have enough time, and I'm also trying to go eat, but Devin Nunes is also in the process of filing these criminal referrals with the FBI. And apparently, according to some tips that I've seen, he's supposed to file them today, which is Thursday.
Not right.
Congressman, you just broke news on the program that you are sending 8 criminal referrals to the AG next week. 3 of them around conspiracy, lying, leaking. Now, one of them, conspiracy to lie to the FISA court, Congressman. We had on your colleague, Jim Himes, recently, who kept pushing back, saying that there was absolutely no wrongdoing in front of the FISA court. And you say?
Well, I don't really care what they say. I mean, they've lied multiple times to the American people. All you have to do is look at their phony memos. They've had the full support of the media, 90% of the media in this country. They all have egg on their face. And so the fact of the matter remains, is justice going to be served, or is justice going to be denied? And that's why we're sending over these criminal referrals. So, there's so much left. Remember, the American people have only seen the pieces that have been declassified so far that we were luckily been able to make classified and let the American people know about how the FISA court was abused. There's still more information. I've said this before. This was their insurance policy. A lot of people think the insurance policy was just the overall investigation of the Trump campaign. It's actually much more conspiratorial than that. That's left behind there. There was exculpatory information. We've talked about it on your show many times. So, look, Maria, if you take what the Democrats have said throughout the last 2.5 years, there's only one thing that you can be certain of, and that is whatever they tell you is wrong or a lie, or they actually mean the opposite.
Should the Mueller report be made public, Congressman?
So that's really going to be an interesting situation. Now, I don't know how long it takes for a criminal referral to be processed by the FBI. I've heard several times over the past few years that the Congress has sent criminal referrals, and then nothing seems to happen for a while, and then you figure that I guess the FBI doesn't really care about these issues, especially perjury complaints. But I think for some reason I do believe that this time the tracks are more aligned. Bill Barr is a better Attorney General at executing this sort of oversight than was Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions really he performed a real dereliction of his duty. And there were other people in the Trump administration that had the same attitude. They were like, well, we're taking these positions in the administration, but we're not going to take any risks by going out and actually doing the job according to the way that, according to the needs of the American people, also according to the Justice Department's own requirements or whatever department we're talking about. It was the same issue with Rex Tillerson, a guy who was thinking, oh, I'm going to be an administrator. I'm not really going to be trying to change the way the department has policy developments. That was Rex Tillerson. He didn't really do anything in order to facilitate American foreign policy. In fact, he was a real wet blanket and never succeeded. It's the same idea with Jeff Sessions. I think nowadays, now that we have obviously Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State, not perfect person, a lot of things that I think he's done wrong in terms of intervention, but certainly better on Korea than Rex Tillerson was. In the same breath, you have to mention that William Barr appears to at least be moving something in order to deal with the abuse of the FISA courts and the whole Russia hoax. So I think that's it for today. There were other things I was going to talk about, but it is getting long and it is getting late for me. So please like the video again, subscribe, share the video. Also subscribe to me on Minds.com. My screen name is Chef Leopard. Same thing on BitChute, and on Gab it's @Starscream85. And I'll talk to you guys later. Enjoy your Thursday.